Greg, welcome to Surfing Stuff. It's amazing to have you on here. Thank you for your time. Bro, I don't even know where to start. Maybe just introduce yourself and then let's get straight to business and take us back to the 1970s, 80s, and let's talk story.
Buddy, let me start with this. Thanks for inviting me on your show. I really appreciate it. And I think, it's funny, we've lost contact for possibly call it decades. And, I just have this thing that, I'll be the worst friend you've ever had. I'm not going to phone you on your birthday. I'm just not wired that way. But if I connect with you and if there's something that happens, I'll just pick up with you where we left off. And I think you and I, back in the days when, you and Ant were just running the most incredible business on the south coast of Durban, and you were a customer of mine. You guys were always a pleasure to deal with and amazing. So I'd almost like to start there. Lovely to reconnect with you, and stoked to be on the show.
Yeah, it's, that was 2003, 2004. So what's that? 20 odd years. Long time, Greg?
Yeah, listen, when I was a kid, if someone said they were 50, it was like, jeepers, you're going to die soon. Gosh, how time has flown. But yes, it's been a while ago. Yeah, it's been a long time ago.
Yes, bro. Greg, just now said take us back to the 70s, 80s. I guess the place to kind of go is, how did the surfing thing all happen for you? Let's just start there, and let's just do a timeline of Greg Swart, and let's just see where it goes. Okay, so how did it start? Who were the influences? Cool. Blah blah blah. Let's go, bro.
Okay, Carly, listen. Thanks for that. It's just a crazy question. I think if I just look at it, it's gone in a blur, but if I actually just look at what an incredible journey it's been, funny enough, it actually started in 1976 at the Durban City Hall. I went with my brother to watch a surf movie called The Sun Seekers, S-O-N, Sun Seekers, as in S-O-N.
Okay.
And these were all like, call it early 70s and late 60s, surfing people that had some sort of Christian experience, and it was a surf movie about these people. And I wasn't sort of in any sort of spiritual framework or anything, but just surfing and what they were doing was just so incredible and appealing to me.
Okay.
And my brother at the time used to take me body surfing and everything like that. And then I lived at Warner Beach, and in the summer of 76, I got a surfboard for Christmas, an old second-hand surfboard for Christmas. And there was a local legend at Warner Beach, which probably one of the most underrated surfers. No one knows about him, a guy called Mark Todd. The most beautiful style, sallow skin, regular footer. And this guy just rode big waves, and he was a machine. And I started surfing at Warner Beach in the summer of 76. And I started surfing with a guy called Greg Danzy, and there were a couple of guys that just don't come to mind right now. But to be honest, I was really bad. Like, I struggled. I had a really, really huge, wide style, and I was just nowhere. And I think to tap it off, at 76, I was young. You're talking about 7, 8 years old. I was 4'7" at 15, so you can imagine how small I was back then. I was just tiny. And anyway, it started at Warner Beach, and I was living with my grandparents, and my mom was living in Durban.
Okay.
And I ended up moving up to Durban to live with my mom. And what was so incredible, I remember it was in 77 sometime. I remember going to stay with my mom, and she lived at North Beach in one of the flats. And I remember the southwest wind was blowing, and I had my surfboard, and I went down to the beach, and it was the first time I'd laid eyes on the Durban beaches that were groomed in the southwest.
Wow.
They were just clean and perfect. And coming from Warner Beach, anybody from the South Coast will tell you the southwest is unkind to a lot of those breaks.
Yeah.
It's choppy, it's got a bit of this and that going on, and, the coast is open ocean.
Yeah, 100%.
And I paddled out with my hair dry at the Bay of Plenty, and the first thing I saw was Michael Burness just doing these helicopter 360s on his single fin. He had done something with his fin. He had put it in the box reverse or something, and he just did 360 after 360 past me to the bowl, and I was just like, I'm not leaving this place ever. And that was the start, and then, just sort of fumbling my way through, and the real kicker was Ernie Thompson had Sean Thompson surfboards in Prince Alfred Street in Durban.
Okay.
And I went to Addington Primary, and myself and Martin Potter went to Addington Primary with Ken Ducey, Stephen Middleton, Stephen Millington, and a couple of guys. And, now it's not great. Back then it wasn't great either, but it's all relative, So we were from the wrong side of the track. My mom was a single mom. There was no bucks. I mean, I met my dad properly for the first time when I was 30.
No
so,
way.
You're growing up in a single home, and I used to go to Prince Alfred Street and I used to look at the surfboards. And Ernie Thompson came up to me one day and he started talking to me, and there was a 5/8 single fin, too big for me, but it had like a Coca-Cola stripe on it with an orange and pink fade on either side of it, and something about this board grabbed me, and I really wanted the board. And he said to me, hey, son, can you surf? I said, I think so. So he said, come here tomorrow and bring your board. So anyway, I finished school, I took my board, and I came to Prince Alfred Street with my board. And Ernie said to me, he said, I got to go and clear my post box at the Marine Parade post office. I'm going to take you to the beach. You're going to have a couple of waves. So anyway, he went to clear his post box, and Ernie used to smoke his cigarettes in his gammy hand because he had that shark attack at Betchy's.
I believe so,
and Yeah, and we walked down onto the beach. I'll never forget it. It was just south of the Wedge, and he said, go out and have a couple of waves. And I went out and I caught a few waves, and I walked out the water, and he said to me, he said, son, you get two kinds of surfers. You get Grammys and Stokies. He said, you're a Stokey. And I didn't know what he was talking about. Like, it was pretty cryptic. So anyway, I go home, and my mom comes home. You're talking, there wasn't the internet, right?
No, of course not. Jeez.
No cell phones, no internet. I don't even think there were fax machines back then. Anyway, my mom, sidebar, like most women in South Africa, had a crush on Sean Thompson, right?
Oh,
I mean,
right.
every woman wanted to sleep with Sean Thompson, if they were honest. So anyway, my mom comes home from work and she goes, hey, I got a call from Sean Thompson's father today. So I go, oh, yeah. He took me to the beach. She goes, there's a board you've got your eye on, and he said you can go and fetch it tomorrow, and he's letting me pay it off over 6 months, and the board was 180 Rand, brand new.
Wow.
So the next day, I go and get the board. Lister Signelli drops me at home with my surfboard, and that was the early part of 1980, and on the 12th of July, 1980, I had a photograph taken outside Prince Alfred Surf Shop, Sean Thompson surfboards with Sean. Pictures appeared of me on a lot of social media channels, standing with the 4'7" twin fin, one of the smallest boards at that point that had been made. I think Glenn Milne had beaten it. Peter Milne made a Glenn a board of 4'6", but it just never got the media exposure. So if we're honest, Glenn got the record, but I ended up on the 12th of July, 1980, being on the front page of the Daily News in this picture with Sean Thompson And it's a great picture because I'm looking up at him in just absolute adoration.
I've seen that, Greg. I've seen that picture, bro. Yeah.
Yeah, you've seen it. And Sean looking at the camera. And I won the SA Champs on that board, and that was really the start. So, for me, from a legacy point of view and possibly from a gratitude point of view, I don't know where my life would be if it wasn't for Ernie Thompson going, "Hey, son, do you surf? And let's go surfing."
Okay. Gee whiz. All those years ago, working with Ant Brods, Ant used to, I wouldn't say often, but every now and again, Ernie Thompson would come up in conversation when you're talking Southern Natal surf riders, and he used to say that his old man, Jerry, I think his name was, if I remember correct, Jerry and Sean's Toppy were big Chinas, according to Brods, way back when. And that's the first time I'd heard about Ernie, or heard of Ernie. And I'd heard he had a double shark attack. Was it?
I'm not sure. I know he definitely had a shark attack, but I think the sad thing was, funny, I actually heard the other day, I think Ernie died at like 55 or something. I mean, I'm sitting here at 57. It was just way too soon. It was just sudden and shocking. But Ernie, and this is what I love about our sport, Karl. And I think this, for me, what I'm about to tell you, is something that really set the trajectory for my life, is that surfing in the early 80s, surfing professionals were personas. Everyone had a persona. So I'll give you my understanding of it. Sean Thompson was like, call it the calculated, the professional, like almost like male supermodel. I mean, Sean was getting paid US dollars, double digits for shoots. Emma was just a competitive genius. Shane Horan was just like call it like a sage. He was like a mystic guru in the way he read a wave and in the way back then, and I don't even think we should frown on it, the way he was experimenting with hallucinogenic drugs and stuff like that, because he wasn't somebody that was like toasting himself so he could lie around doing nothing. I mean, I watched Shane Horan do the very first floater in 1981 that I'd seen, and it was just before dark one evening, and I got out the water and I was trying to tell everybody what he did, but there wasn't a word called the floater.
Jesus.
So I'll give you an example. Being a young guy, I couldn't get waves on the main peak. So I would sit midway down, and I learned how to use the current. Everyone wanted to paddle on your inside. So as a kid, I was streetwise. They would paddle on my inside, I would paddle on their inside, and then I'd paddle into the rip and swing wide and hopefully get into the back of a wave deep, and anyone on my inside didn't have a chance.
Wow.
So anyway, this wave comes, and Shane's on this wave. The year he won the Gunston in 1981 with that pink and white ripcord wetsuit on single fin McCoy, bright colors, and a section of about, I don't want to exaggerate, but it had to have been 25 meters. And he was on the other side of it deep, and it just barreled and closed out. And I was like, this is me. I am on this wave. I'm going. And I was paddling hard, and I heard him call. And I looked left, and he had that beautiful right angle in his stance. He had that like sort of set square right angle in his stance. And he was riding on top of the barrel, rode across me. I pulled back, and fruit fell below me and landed at the bottom of the wave and carried on surfing. No one did that. No one did that.
Jeez.
So how do you explain that when you get out the water just before dark at Dancy's Milk Bar going, hey, you won't believe what Shane Horan did? So Shane wore crazy hats, crazy headwear. Rabbit Bartholomew, he was like Mick Jagger. He was like a rock star. He had presence. He had following. And these guys all had these personas. And I think, I mean, if you had said this conversation with Tommy Lawson, Peter Lawson, Mike Burness, a lot of those guys, a lot of us looked at this and just went, hey, I want to be a pro surfer. And I think it had a whole lot to do with surfing It had a whole lot to do with these people were comfortable in their skin. They knew who they were. They had an identity, and they were just going at it. And I just looked at that, and I just went, this is what I've got to do. The fact that I failed it's another discussion. We'll talk about that just now. But yeah, anyway, I'm rambling.
Gee whiz. Yes, you throwing around some serious names there. Wow, man. Wow. I hadn't thought of Shane Aran. In fact, when was the last time anybody thought, and I say that with respect, when was the last time anybody thought of Shane Aran? You know what I mean? And yeah, wow.
Yeah.
Jeez. Yeah.
So Shane, I remember Shane getting introduced to him, and I remember like a year later riding a left wave in the Bay Bowl, and I kicked out, and he was paddling out in the rip, and he greeted me by name.
No way.
And I'll tell you something, Karl, that thing had such an impact on me because, if I'm honest, there were people I saw around me as call it pro surfers or wannabe pro surfers.
Yeah.
There was a lot about them I respected, their surfing, but there's a lot about who they were that I didn't like.
Okay.
And there was something about Shane, like, that was pretty authentic and humble. And you know what I loved in his authenticity? Shane back then, you know, didn't hide the fact that he smoked weed or marijuana or whatever. I mean, back then you'd go to jail in South Africa or whatever. But I ended up staying with Shane in J Bay one year, you know, and I was just going through a bit of a stage in my career and stuff like that. And, you know, I remember like staying with Shane for like a week in J Bay, and we were spending hours and hours talking about people, life, spirituality, great things, you know. Okay. We were getting stoned. We were going surfing and we were ripping. And to become a friend of his, and, you know, the one year at the Billabong Pro, got to the quarterfinals, round before quarters, okay. And I was just broken. And I remember he just took me to his room and he pulled out this brown box. He opened it up and it had a red velvet cover on it. And inside were these like 12 ampules of this like golden looking oil. And it was pure ginseng out of Japan. And it was glass. And he snapped off a piece of the glass and he said, you need to drink this. And I think they were $100 or $50 a piece.
Goodness gracious.
So Shane loved Japan. He was infatuated with Japan. I mean, in that interview of him in Surfers the movie, when they ask him about Martin Potter, he goes, Martin Potter, Nami Nori Ichibaniman, which means like Martin Potter, number one surfer, you know. I mean, who answers in Japanese? Anyway, I had this ampule of ginseng, and jeepers, man, that shit lit me up. So this is getting back to these persona, you know, and then having MR hand me my Natal baggies in 1982, making the Natal surf team. Mark Richards was the guest for the KZNSA, and he handed out the baggies. And there's a photo I've lost.
Yes,
there's a photo I've lost. Jeepers, I wish I had it. It's a profile picture of me with a pair of white corduroy gotcha denims on.
Yeah.
And a yellow shirt, looking up at MR, getting handed my baggies, and I don't have it. Yeah. Anyway.
Yes, you know, I just going back to you spoke of Japan there, and not to digress from the conversation. I remember. Oh man, this must have been shortly after I committed financial suicide after leaving.
We've all done that.
After leaving Bronze's surf shop, I ended up down in J Bay. Like, yes, it's just like a place where you end up, eh? And I was there, and Graham Hines was away for a week. He went somewhere and said, Karl, do you want to look after Graham's house? And in that time frame, Mark Spout had a little shaping bay in St. Francis. that the Staples had put up for him, if I've got the story correct, yeah. And I spent a week there with Mark at his place, just at the window, like the steering, watching him shape. And he was okay with it to a degree.
Great shaper.
Man, I tell you, I learned so much from Mark. And
what a great man.
Yeah,
good man, Mark Spout.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And getting to know Mark over that short period of time and what I'd heard, he was one of the few guys. And again, I don't know for sure. I don't have it in writing, but he was one of the few shapers from South Africa. I think of him, M.C.D, and I can't remember who the other guys were, that got invited to shape in Japan. So just, you spoke Japan, and Spout came to mind,
Let's talk about that. I got a couple stories about that.
Okay.
Mark Spout had a connection with a guy called Terence Lotter. Terence Lotter's been in Japan for... He must have been there for 40 years or so.
Okay.
He was a surfer from Durban, one of Gordon Stevens' mates, ended up in Japan. Mark Spout was one of the early guys to go to Japan, very undercover.
Okay.
Spider Murphy went to Japan, very profile.
Okay.
And PD had a couple of stints in Japan. But if you had to aggregate it and go, who was the guy that had the greatest sort of, call it presence or impact in Japan, was Spider. And the crazy story, in 1985, there was a cyclone that hit Durban, and I think the piers were still being built, but they weren't fully built.
Yeah.
And Spider made me a 6.5, a triple stringer 6.5 that was just a beast in the barrel.
Gee whiz.
And him and I were surfing, but with it being cyclone, it was chocolate brown. And we had the session on the weekend where you're like pulling into brown barrels and it's going dark and you're making some and you're getting drilled in others. And I came out the water, and Spider and I have got a similar story about the same session. I came out the water and that was that. That night I went home and I kind of like the next day I kind of felt like I had the flu, I was feeling sick, everything. Spider was flying to Japan, okay? So on his Durban-Joburg flight, here's the common denominator. We both never cleared our sinuses, so we both had chocolate brown water in our faces.
Oh, goodness.
Spider goes on this flight. You can ask Spider. I'm sure you've had him on your show. I hope you get him on your show soon if you haven't. But anyway, Spider gets this Durban-Joburg flight, and he feels like he's going to explode. So in Joburg, he phones Joan, his wife Joan, from what was proverbially or affectionately known as the Tiki Box. So he's talking to Joan going, hey, I can't go to Japan. I've nearly died on this flight with this head condition. And he drops the money he's holding in his hand. And as he bends down to pick it up, he reckons he hears this like crack, and all the shit seawater just drains out of his head. And he goes, Joan, you won't believe what's happened. I'm fine. And gets on the plane and goes to Japan. I got a sinus infection from that thing to hell and back. So the moral of the story is if you're going to surf Durban and the water's off color, make sure you flush your nasals out.
Hey, bro. Hey, just quickly, one last thing about the Spouts, the brothers. When was the last time you checked Gav?
So I haven't seen Gavin for ages, but every now and again we've exchanged some messages and stuff like that.
Okay.
And you know what? Like I said earlier in the show, I'll be the worst friend you've ever had, but have had some really great memories and great connections with Spowie. And let me tell you, Gavin, when I was an aspiring pro, Gavin being a bit older than me, Gavin was a very, very fierce competitor I have a lot of respect for. And, I think the Spowett brothers, so for me, one of the things, and I think this is what made Gavin great, was coming from the bluff. A lot of Durban guys surfed the bluff and surfed Cave Rock, if they were honest, under duress. Sean Thompson surfed Cave Rock. We we all had our doses of cave rock, but we all had the fear of God in us about cave rock. Rudy was the man. Rudy still is the man at 60 whatever years of age. Rudy's the guy. But the Spowers came from there. And I think, the Spowart brothers, so Surfing Cave Rock, Gavin played a big role in helping me there.
Okay.
Mark Spout helped me there. Funny enough, 1982, the SA champs at J-Bay was 10 to 12 foot, the boys division. There was snow on the Gamtoos Mountains. I was standing on the rocks with my 4'7" twin fin, and it's 1980, and Dorothy Potter, Martin Potter's mom, was standing on the rocks, and I didn't want to jump off. Her and Baron Stander were standing there. And back then, they didn't protect kids. It was like, okay, the under-14s are going out. This is the schedule. It's 9 in the morning, and it's 8 to 10 feet supers. Think about what I'm telling you. Just think about what I'm telling you. No jet skis, nothing, okay? I didn't want to jump. And Martin Potter's mother, she just went, "Jump, you little cunt," and excuse the language, and just pushed me in the back. And my board, I used my board as a shield, and I landed in the channel. My leg rope got stuck on the rocks, and I slid off the nose of my twin fin, grabbed my board, and just got shit whipped off the point and literally got sucked out. It was so big, I got stuck out there. Guess who came to rescue me? Guess who came to rescue me?
The Spowarts.
Mark Spowart paddled out on a 6'2", which for me was like a 729 or whatever. It was just this big board. And he came and he swapped boards. And I remember he said to me, Mark Spout said to me, he said, "Greg, the only way you're going to get in is if you get caught inside. You're going to have to man up." And I remember like paddling into the impact zone on the 6'2" and eating shit and coming in somewhere near tubes. And he literally paddled in on a 4'7" twin fin. And the guy was like 6'3", you know. So like, I know Mark Spowers passed on. One day when I cross the line and we get to see each other, I'm going to thank him for that, because he literally saved me. I was stuck out there. No one else came for me. And he was surfing for Southern Natal back then. The KZN guys left me out there. Mark Spowers from Southern Natal came and fetched me.
Yes, bro. Hey, you know, Greg, I'm so stoked that we can do podcasts like this to capture these moments, eh? Because you know what?
Yeah.
Your story, you know, it's just... You were telling me earlier that you were thinking about, or you started off writing a book. You know, Greg, those little things, hey, it's gold, man. Gold.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know what, Carly? You know what I say to people? Like, I think about it, you know, if you think about it musically, like, you talk to anybody from any walk of life, there's something about the music in the 80s that was just something. Like, it's just this golden era of music. You've got, you know, whatever side of the line you were on, you know, in the 80s, there was In Excess, there was Midnight Oil, there was Ganga Jang in the late 80s, all these different bands. And at the same time, you had George Michael, Michael Jackson, Madonna, all these things, you know. And in the mid-80s, I matriculated in 1985.
Okay.
And being a teenager in the 80s and just being a young, aspiring surfer and pro surfer and growing up in that era, I mean, you're never going to get that shit back again, you know. And just so many good memories and so many good people and so much good stuff, you know. And Gary Green, who heads up and owns the Sector Group, I don't know if you know, but he put on an evening late last year. I forget the name of the evening. It's just taken me by surprise, but it was an evening which just celebrated the mix and the hybrid of music and surf culture, you know, in the 80s into the 90s, and, you know, sort of what it meant, you know. And it was just a really good evening. And I think what I loved about the evening is just this cross-section of age groups and people that use the ocean in a different way, from people that rode bodyboards to connecting with Roman Rizak. Roman and I went to Addington Primary together.
No way.
Roman's been a proud kneeboarder ever since, you know. And so, I just think there's something, I think our role as South Africans and the role South Africa played in professional surfing and professional sport, I think our problem, I don't think we've celebrated and valued ourselves enough. I think if I'm honest, if I could attach a label to South African surfers, I think we're groupies. We've always favored and honored and looked up to everybody else except ourselves. And I think you look at the Gunston, you look at the Bay, you look at the Persona. I mean, for me, one of the most underrated surfers in South Africa has to be Michael Beness. Has to be Michael Beness. Everyone talks about Sean. I mean, and you just look at Michael and what he achieved and his burn brand and, how he was in the Instinct campaigns. And, Sean won X many Gunstons. Michael won the same amount in the amateur division, and just Michael doing 1 o'clock vertical re-entries when goofy footers were struggling to hit the lip. These are good stories.
Yes. Mark Burness, maybe I should get him on here sometime. Yeah.
Hey, I tell you, it would be valuable, Like, seriously, he shuns the limelight. Michael doesn't like limelight, but I tell you something, Michael's got some great stories, and Michael's the real deal. Yeah.
Yes.
Michael's a professional.
The last time I saw Mark Burness, just as going back years, do you remember at let me just get this right. At North Beach there was like a beach building. Gig Cilliers had a surf shop there. Him and Alistair Brown had a surf shop there. Jacko had
That was just the new pier. That was just the new pier.
The new pier.
There was the Ocean Water Sports Centre. So
that's right.
There was the coffee shop that Bruce Jackson owned, and then Gigs had Surf Zone. That was.
I've never spoken to Mark. I know who he is, and I'm just petrified of the you know what I mean? Coming from the South Coast, and you got all the personalities. So the last time I saw Mark Burness he was sat at the coffee shop there. He obviously just come out from a surf, and he was having a coolie or whatever he was doing. And I remember seeing him there, and like sometimes you take pictures in your mind. You got that photograph.
Yep.
I've got one of those in my pip of Mark Burness. Never spoken to the bloke. And funny that you bring him up now. You know what I mean? Anyway.
Yeah. Let me tell you about Michael Burness. So I surfed the Masters SA Champs last year in August. I came second in the over 55s.
Okay.
I won it the year before. Vic Bay was 6 to 8 feet on and off through the days.
Yeah.
Michael Burness in one of his heats got a 10 and a 9.8.
High ball.
No, Karl, let me explain something to you. The guy surfed no different to how he surfed 25 years ago. So let me tell you this. It's not like, it's the Masters event and the judges are being kind and you got some guy who's over 60, so we're going to throw him some scores. He did the same textbook, clean, one bottom turn. I'm going to say something, you probably will never hear it. Kelly Slater has the worst bottom turn in the business. Watch Kelly Slater. He does a double bottom turn. That stuff is shit. I wasn't brought up like that. You don't do a double bottom turn off the bottom. What are you doing? It's a redundant, it's something you don't need. And I have absolute respect for who Kelly is. I'm not 1/50th of who he is as a surfer. But let me tell you, Michael had that takeoff drop down, facing the beach, set the rail, and from there, 1 o'clock, vertical re-entry in the pitching lip and down. 3 or 4 of those back-to-back and kicks out on a 6 to 8 foot wave at 62 or 3 years old. Soak that up. Soak that in. Just let that settle a while. So you need to get Mark Burness on your show.
Jeez. Wow.
Yeah, seriously, Karl, outstanding performance.
Yes. Hey, you know who's just come to mind as you talking, Mark Burness there. Raymond Robinson's just come to my mind.
Raymond. So we're talking about surf personas, right?
Yeah.
Let me throw in a story, Raymond.
Yeah.
Raymond Robinson. Okay, so it's probably 80 or 81. I'm a little grom, everything. I'm too young. But I was regularly drinking alcohol on Friday nights with other friends. It's what you did. We were loose back then as kids.
Were you drinking beer? Never, bro.
Yeah. So anyway, at the Eden Rock Hotel, there was a band called the Rotors. They were a punk band. So you got to understand, the rest of the world was just coming out of Olivia Newton-John, John Travolta, and Xanadu. And surf was into punk. The Sex Pistols, and the Rotors, this local band, the Rotors. There was Evoid, all these great local bands. So anyway, the Eden Rock had this band music evening, and I go to try and get in, and I get blocked. But at the door is Raymond Robertson and Hilton Wade.
Hilton Wade? No ways.
Yes,
that's true. Okay.
So Hilton Wade is sitting tearing the tickets, and Raymond's taking the money. Now, Hilton looks like an undertaker. He's dressed in a black suit. He's got a broken neck brace on, but he doesn't have a broken neck. He's wearing a pair of Varney sunglasses, those big Varney sunglasses, and he's got this powdered white face. And people are going, "Hey, Hilton, how's it?" And he's just not responding to anyone. This is him being in character. He's in persona. Raymond, on the other hand, is standing there looking like a prostitute. He's got this like half-crop green shirt on with a pair of tight, checked, skinny jeans on with short back and sides and curly top wearing makeup. I mean, is it okay to say, what the fuck? So I'm standing there like 13 years of age looking at these two guys, and I looked up to them. They were both great surfers. And this was their gig. So anyway, I'm too young to get in. So Gordon says to me, "Come around the side." So I walk around the side in the alley to where Montezuma, there was a cafe called Montezuma around the side. And there were these like tilted sliding windows. And Gordon Stevens, this beast of a man, grabbed me by my two hands and just yanked me up and pulled me in. And I'm in this punk party, the Rotors, as this young kid drinking beer and running around watching all the shit. And at the end of the evening, the Rotors, at the end of the set, they just destroyed all their equipment. I'll never forget it. Just broke the guitars, kicked in the drums, and that was just music in the early 80s.
Gee whiz. You know, the last time I saw Hilton Wade, he's a terrific bloke. What a good guy, man.
Yeah, he's a solid guy.
I saw Hilton. In fact, I surfed with him and his son Michael at Bantham in England, South Devon, a couple of years ago.
Okay.
And it turned out, I didn't know this, but Patrick and Dave Reno and Bobby, the Reno Brachis, they cousins with Hilton. I didn't know that. And I had some wonderful chats with Hilton. Pam and Hilton, yeah, good people.
Yeah.
Man.
Hey, listen, Pam and Hilton, like I said, I'm a bad friend. Friends of mine I've lost touch with, great people. Spent years in Glenridge Church with them. And, listen, just super, super people. But I just want to quickly circle back to Raymond as a surfer.
Yeah.
Raymond Robertson. So Raymond rode single fin swallowtails, a little bit shorter than most guys.
Okay.
Wayne Shaw as well rode Starbolts. So there was Starbolt, Lightning Bolts, and Lamont, and they all came out of the same factory, 98 West Street. Okay, that's where Giggs learned to be a retailer. Roman learned to be a retailer. Jean-Marc Tosti learned to be a retailer. A lot of people came out of 98 West Street. Nicky Williams used to glass boards there. I ended up having a stint glassing boards there in the 90s. But the short story is Raymond Robertson had a very, very distinct and unique style. And I think what Raymond had as a style, there was a lot of crabby surfers. So you get a shoestring and a crab. A shoestring is someone that's got their knees knocked together and their feet close together. So Joel Parkinson would be a shoestring.
Okay.
Kelly Slater's actually a crab. Martin Potter sits in between, but possibly more technically a shoestring. Sean Thompson's the definitive crab. Wide stance, Michael Savage crab, Mark Price a crab. Now Raymond and a guy called Gary Temperley.
Okay.
Gary Temperley was another one of the most underrated surfers in 80, 81, 82 in the Simon Anderson era.
Okay.
Everybody was on this thing about Mark Richards. Gary Temperley was just this incredible surfer, a very similar style to Ray Robertson.
Okay.
And yeah, I think Ray Robertson didn't achieve great things in contests, but from a surfing point of view was just incredible, and also just a marketing genius. You know, like being sponsored by Gotcha in the 80s, Raymond would come on shoots and he would art direct shoots. And, you know, we were surfers, we weren't supermodels.
Yeah.
And I remember Raymond teaching us how to behave in front of a camera and how to, like he told me, he said, Greg, you have to learn how to smile with your eyes. Don't smile. Smile with your eyes. Engage the camera. And he would let you freeform and free flow. And,
wow.
You know, you look at a lot of those Gotcha ads back in the day, you know, Gotcha and Instinct were rivals. Instinct's ads were very clean. They were very surf. They were very good. You know, without comparing them negatively, Gotcha just had this edge. And I think it started from Michael Thompson, and it sort of ran through Mark Price and Paul Nordee into Raymond Robertson and into us as athletes, Barry van der Meulen, Noel Rami, Pierre Tosti, Michael Savage, myself. So the Gotcha shoots, if you got to get invited in a Gotcha shoot, it was a privilege. And Raymond used to art direct them. Raymond was the guy, and he was a creative genius. Yeah.
Wow. You know, just maybe changing the topic slightly here. You're speaking of Gotcha. Yes, like, bro. I remember when I started working for Ant Brods, would have been January of 1992 as a lighty in high school, bro. And it was around that time that Gotcha released M.C.D. And I remember checking that M.C.D. to me as a 12, 13-year-old, like you talking about meeting Ernie and et cetera, et cetera. When I saw M.C.D., bro, that was like, I don't think any labels ever come, in my humble opinion, in my subjective opinion, I think that M.C.D. in my mind today still is the best label or section of a label that was ever put out. And I mean, everybody can think differently, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
But I remember seeing you and a whole, there was Matt Archibald.
Yep.
Mark Stewart, the boogie boarder legend.
100%.
There was you, him, and Derek Ho.
Brock Little.
Brock Little. Derek
Ho.
Talk to me
Martin
about that.
Potter.
Tell me about that, please. That photo shoot. Talk to me about that shoot, bro.
I'm going to tell you a story about M.C.D. Okay, so here's a crazy story, and I know we've been going on for long, and I'm going to try and rush through it quickly. So in the 90s, so my daughter was born in September 1992. Okay. And M.C.D. had launched possibly 1991, okay? And when M.C.D. launched, what a lot of people don't understand, M.C.D. was supposed to be and do what the Rip Curl Search did.
Oh.
And a lot of people don't understand that. So let me tell you a little story. I was sponsored by Gotcha, and I got pulled onto M.C.D. Nicky Williams and myself got pulled onto M.C.D. Okay? And M.C.D. was, Gotcha Sportswear at that time went mainstream. Michael Thompson's marketing genius, Gotcha could not but help grow and expand, and surf was just pumping. And what M.C.D. was Michael Thompson looking at preserving the core of surf, and preserving the core of Gotcha. So, I mean, Gotcha at that time, people don't understand. Gotcha wasn't a brand, it was a psyche. It wasn't a brand, it was a psyche. And as that trajectory started going mainstream, Michael in his genius went, hey, we have to need and be and do something else. So there's a book called Size is the Enemy of Cool. It's about the trajectory and evolution of brands and how they sort of evolve and go through things. You get brands like Volcom or offshoots from Quicksilver because for whatever reason. Anyway, I'm getting distracted, but let's get back to M.C.D. So on the M.C.D. side, Mark Price came out in the early 90s. I think it was the year I went to Hawaii. I went to Hawaii in the winter of 92. And in about the June, July, I'd always wanted to go to Hawaii. And I'm going to say some stuff that might be uncomfortable for some people to hear. But at that time, and I can say it humbly because it was true, at that time in big waves, I was leading the charge. I was loose, I was wild, and I was riding waves and doing things a lot of people weren't interested in, okay? Not the kind of big waves that Twiggy and them have gone to.
Okay.
Let's just call it the shore breaks in Durban, 12 to 15-foot shore breaks. I was riding big boards and I was doing my thing. And anyway, Gotcha, I went to Gotcha, and my whole life I'd wanted to be a pro surfer. And when I went to them for sponsorship, they turned around and said, there's no money, there's a recession. And I ended up joining a Bible college, and I didn't travel.
Okay.
That was after the military in the late 80s into the early 90s. So my whole dream from 9 years old had died. Anyway, M.C.D. came along, and Mark Price wanted me to go to Hawaii. So he came to South Africa. And Mark and I went surfing down the south coast at the spot.
Okay.
And my budget at Gotcha at the time was, at M.C.D. was 500 Rand a month. That's what I was getting. And Mark said, hey, let's go surfing. And we went surfing at the spot. It was 4 or 5 feet, and I was riding a 6'5" PD, reverse bottom.
Okay.
And I was on point, and we had a great morning. And at the end of it, Mark said to me, he said, Greg, I want to put together a program, yourself, Brock Little and Matt Archibald. I'm going to send you guys around the world, and we're going to make surf movies, and you're going to go to Hawaii. And he said, I'm going to make sure you arrive in Hawaii. You're going to have Pat Rawson's waiting for you.
Wow.
And we're going to do it. We drove from the spot to SA Clothing in Jacobs, Mabini.
I remember that, yeah.
We walked into their head office, and Mark Price has got presence, man. And he just said, Greg, sit here and wait here. And I remember sitting in reception speaking to Cara and Sterling. And Mark went into a meeting with Ray Robertson and Jean-Marc, who were at the helm. And 15 minutes later, they called me into the room. And JM said, he said, hey, Greg, he said, it seems like you've impressed Mark, a big deal. We're sending you to Hawaii. My daughter was born on the 9th of September, 1992. On the 1st of November, I flew to Hawaii, arrived to a bunch of Pat Rawsons, and that was the start of the M.C.D. thing. That was the double spread and the zigzag, the M.C.D. ad, riding a 7.6 coming off the bottom at Pop. That was the Gunston 500 poster. There's another story about that. Full of stories, Karl. I told you, I warned you. I said I'm full of stories. So anyway.
Wow.
And, I'm just super grateful to Mark Price as a core surfer. So what I think M.C.D. did was that M.C.D. versus Gotcha was attitudinal. It was like M.C.D. wasn't smoke weed, take drugs, ride a motorbike. Unfortunately, I think it ended up there. And I think if I'm honest with you, from a marketing point of view, M.C.D. ended up losing its way. If you really look at what M.C.D. did, if M.C.D. had held its trajectory, the Rip Curl search should never have ever happened.
Wow.
The Rip Curl search should never have happened. And that's another story. Chatting to Derek Hahn, Derek asking me about Frankie Oberholzer and Mike Roscoe. Whatever. So M.C.D., more core division, should have stayed core and pure to surf. And I think it lost its way. But, so M.C.D, I have a tattoo on my back. It's the M.C.D logo with my nickname Saurus through the back. I remember Solly Berkovitz, when he saw it, he looked at it and he went, "Hey, Saurus, I've lost all my respect for you." I said, "Gee, Solly, I've never wanted your respect." I mean, I had the tattoo back when tattoos were uncool. It was like, whatever. And you know what? This was surf persona. This is what we were talking about. At one point, I was smoking weed, riding big waves, doing whatever, and I was going through a phase in my life, and I don't apologize for it, just a good memory. M.C.D, tragedy.
When did they fold, or when did they cease to exist? I can't remember. I remember them. It was a hurrah when it started. Only select surf shops had it. And I remember the posters, and then it kind of in the mid-90s went away.
You know what I think happened? I think if you look at it, look at the search. Look at Frankie and the search and Rip Curl search. I think what a lot of people don't realize is everybody thought that the Rip Curl search was about Tom Curran being an inspiration to Frankie. People are confused. Derek Hahn put Frankie on the search to take Tom Curran from being a boring competitive genius to unlock his real talent. A lot of people don't understand that.
Well, let me tell you what, before this conversation, I was one of those ignorant brethren.
Seriously. Tom Curran, if Tom Curran was on call with us, he'd tell you he was bored with who he is and what he was doing. He was calculated. Do you know Tom Curran has a statistic where over 85% of his heats were won in the last 30 seconds? Reverse the stat. Technically, 85% of his wins, he was losing up until the last 30 seconds. What was the kicker? Tom Curran came out of the NSSAA surf program, which was headed up by Ian Cairns, who was one of the bronze Aussies.
Okay. And
Ian Cairns had a very, very simple strategy. Simple. He had an A and a B strategy. An A strategy, you sat where the A-grade waves were, and you got A-grade waves and A-grade scores. Your B-grade strategy kicked in when A failed. And you had to have the ability to take a B-grade wave and get an A-grade score. And Tom Curran had this freakish connection with the ocean where he would just paddle into the middle of nowhere and get a wave. That's another whole different discussion. But Tom Curran's ability was taking shit waves and getting the scores he needed. That's the fact. Well, that's the stats.
Thank you for educating me, Greg.
So Frankie coming into the search, I'm going to say something. I might go to jail for this. Tom Curran was clean cut. He was this guy, hated the limelight, everything. He was the American golden boy, blah, 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 blah. I ended up having a guy called Jeremy Biles staying with me, one of the Aussie guys.
Yeah.
And he told me when Tom started sort of deconstructing, he saw Tom Curran somewhere in France standing down the beach smoking a joint and going surfing. That would have been global scandal. It would be the equivalent of Kelly Slater smoking a joint. Let's just talk about that.
Sure.
Can't happen. There was so much pressure on Tom Curran. Tom Curran was a phantom. Nicky Wood was a phantom. Nicky Wood went undercover because he went to a surf movie once, and people in the surf movie were laughing at Mark Richards, his godfather. And Nicky Wood said to me, he said, "I don't ever want to be in that situation." So he shunned the limelight.
Gee whiz.
Phantom. Tom Curran was a phantom. He hated the limelight. So Tom Curran ended up going from this competitive, calculated machine. He started smoking weed and going surfing with Frankie. What do you think the byproduct of that shit was? The Rip Curl search.
Yes. Yeah, you just popped to my mind now. You speak Rip Curl search was Martin Daly. Wow, I only met Martin once, and I just think of the Indies trader, and that just popped into mind as you were speaking. Greg, I want to ask you something quickly. Your spiritual life. You brought up just that interests me, and I don't want to harp on it, but you said you went to Bible college.
Let's talk about it, man.
Yeah. Well, what's your story in brief? Just for people.
If I'm honest with you, I'm a walking contradiction.
Yeah.
I'm a living, walking contradiction. And I'll tell you why. Without being a victim and without going into detail, I come from a different side of the track and had a radical journey growing up, okay? And I never, ever wanted to be a victim. And I hope somewhere along the line, to my credit, I've never played the victim. I've always just kind of hustled and navigated my way through it. But somewhere along the line, something in the late 70s, 76, watching the Sunseekers, I looked into these people's faces when they were talking about having this experience with Jesus. And the adults in my life at the time were all unreliable and drunkards.
Okay.
And as I sit here, I have a very healthy relationship with alcohol. I'm not self-righteous. I like a few drinks. I have no problem with it. But short story, something ignited in me. And then in 1981, in 1982, was the 22nd of May, 1982. I went on a surf trip down the coast with Chris Van Lennep, Mark Morgenthau, and we camped at the spot.
Oh, yeah.
And I woke up at 3:30 in the morning, and there was a guy sitting in his car with the lights on, and it was cold. And I jumped in his car, and he was reading the Bible. And 2 weeks earlier, I'd gone to a Catholic church in Point Road on my own, and I dressed in my Sunday best at the time, which was a bright blue pair of gotcha corduroy shorts,
yeah,
and a T-shirt and a pair of slops. But I arrived at my Catholic Mass at 5 to 6, but it had started earlier, so I was technically late.
Okay.
And I walked in, and there were all these old people, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, during the service, I went up, I got my communion, and the priest made a spectacle of me.
Oh, no.
And I remember running down the street with the communion disc in my hand in Point Road, and I threw it on the ground, and I just went, fuck you. I just swore into the heavens. I just swore at God, because once again, our Greg wasn't good enough. And 2 weeks later, sitting in this car, this guy's got this Bible open, and I tell him the story, and he goes, Greg, he said, God has a call on your life. He has something special on your life, and he's doing something special with you. And as he spoke to me, I just started to weep. And I was like a hard kid, like weeping just wasn't even optional, and I just started weeping. And he said to me, would you like to accept Jesus into your life, And I said to him, do I have to fill out any forms? And he said, no, right here, right now. And he took me through a prayer. I got out of the car and I started running around the grass lawns of the spot in the early hours of the morning, the same place where I got shot at and hijacked in 1997, another whole story. But that was the start of my Christian experience. And unfortunately, I came into Christianity in the early 80s, which was very much, I'd call it charismania. It was the prosperity gospel. It was the faith message. If you weren't rich, and if you weren't healed, and if you weren't living this pure life, you had some sort of sin in your life, and there was something wrong with you.
Yeah.
And to be honest, I was just a really broken young guy, and I came into Christianity, and I kind of had this feeling like, I've given my life to Jesus, I'm now supposed to be okay. And I just wasn't okay. And it was the start of puberty for me.
Oh, boy.
I started puberty in the year that I gave my life to Christ. So I would, like a girl would walk past me with perfume, and I would literally want to blow a load in my pants, and I'm supposed to be like reading the Bible and loving Jesus. How do you reconcile all this stuff? So I just went on this journey of trying to be this perfect person.
Well, good luck.
And,
good luck.
And
yes.
If I look at it, like a large part of my career in and through the 80s was me actually just being a fake. Externally, I looked like I had it together. I was going to churches and talking about Jesus and how wonderful everything was. And all of that was great. I just didn't have it together. But the church wasn't a safe place to go, hey, I'm not okay. It wasn't safe. So it was like, now that Jesus has forgiven you, now you better get your shit together. And I was very academic as a kid. I was an A-grade student right through school. I got A's for history. So I read the New Testament within the first month of being a young Christian at 14. So I started asking guys in Christian leadership about the book of Romans and justification by faith and all these different things. And some of these adults, but to quickly flip it, at that time, God had placed something on me that was unique. So my very first church service I went to, I gave my testimony and I got all these people praying over me and all these things. And amazing things. I ended up leading Chris van Lennep to the Lord, praying with him in his 1972 Beatles. And Chris, if you ever got him on his show, he will testify to that. So I don't ever deviate from the Jesus person and my Christian experience I had. Where I've changed and where I've pivoted is I just think the mistake we've made is that Jesus never came to organize religion. He came to deconstruct it. Not as in a free-for-all and do what you want, but he came to save the world. And we unfortunately have created it as do good, get good, and you might get a pink slip to the country club in the sky. And you know what? People are not buying that. They're just not. So I can tell you something now. One of the key things for me, if you look in the Bible, unfortunately, charismatic Christianity starts its journey in Genesis chapter 3. You've got to go to Genesis chapter 1, where it says man was made in the image and likeness of God. Then skip forward to John chapter 1, where it says about Jesus, it says, in him was life, and that life was the light of men. Verse 14 says, no amount of darkness has been able to put it out. So because our starting point has been humanity's a piece of shit, our identity has fundamentally been wrong. When you reconnect people to their identity as sons and daughters of God, they behave accordingly. And that's what Jesus did to Nicodemus in John chapter 3. He said, Nicodemus, unless you are born from above, you will never understand what I'm talking about. And that born from above is the Greek word called anuthen. Okay? And unfortunately, you can translate that word as born again. So the entire world has created an entire religion out of two verses, John 3 and 1 Peter chapter 2, called born again, where Jesus wasn't wanting to create anything called born again. What Jesus was going, Jesus never came to invent a new religion called Christianity. And he never came to show that he was God. He actually came to show us what it was like to be human. And that's the part we've missed. So the gospel and the good news, which I've come to understand, is that God's saving the whole world, whether you like it or not. And you look at the parables of the guys going and working in the field. He gives the guys that ended up working for an hour the same wages as the guys that worked for 8. Is that fair? No, it's not. What's the moral of the story? Grace is not fair. Because if God was fair, we would all burn to death.
Yeah, that's what we deserve, if I've understood it correct.
Well, thank God for God. So I've come to see that it's better than I understand. It's kinder than I understand. And I'm really on a daily basis learning to pray without words. There's a wonderful group of Christian mystics, contemplative prayer, learning how to be in our hearts, not speaking, listening, And I'm someone that speaks too much, as you and everyone would know. I haven't stopped talking for, I think, an hour solid. But I don't have a safe place to be myself. And funny, you inviting me to be on this show, I've just felt I get to have this opportunity to just go, okay, this is possibly the book I might not write, but here it is. And let me tell you, to be honest, I'm tired of God being a serial killer, and the gospel we serve the world is that Jesus saved us from an angry God. I don't think so. I really don't think so. Yeah.
So, talking Bible and talking Christianity is, what I've experienced with it is that if you get different folks from different denominational settings, it's quite often if you're conversing, and when there's always going to be a disagreement about this verse or this or this or that, whatever the thing is how to actually go about it and go, okay, cool, that's where you at, this is where I'm at, and be gentle with one another, because it oftentimes turns into an immediate bun fight, and the one's trying to sell his point or impress his point on the next bloke, and like, you wrong, we haven't learned how to go, okay, cool, you there, I'm here, let's take it back to our own personal study, see where it is, and then be convinced in your own mind. I
love the words you've used there, Karl, about being gentle with one another. And I think there's a lot that's been going on in the world that charismatic Christianity is demonized. It's demonized things like yoga and meridian energies in the body and energy fields and all these things. At the end of the day, everything comes through God, from God, to God. We all know that. But I think the most dangerous thing, I'll tell you, I've made mistakes. So I'm at the point I'm at right now, if I'm honest, for getting it wrong. I'm where I am right now. I'm not the same person I was 7 years ago. And can I tell you why?
Tune me, bro.
Because of my need to be right. My need to be right and my being sure of what I knew, because I had a Bible verse to back it up, broke relationships. And the most dangerous thing in the entire world is being right. And one is singular, two is oppositional, three is relational. That's why you have Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. That's why you have proton, neutron, and electron. Think about it. The fundamental building block of reality is relational.
Yeah.
And if you need to be right, and if you're arguing your point, if you need to win, someone else has to lose. It's tug of war. It's like sitting on a plane. What would happen if the air hostess came and said chicken or fish? What would happen if you said yes? Would you get both? Who knows? And I spent years trying to be right, studying the Bible to be right, only to be reminded of the scripture where Jesus says, woe to you, scribes and Pharisees. You've got your heads stuck in your Bibles, but you're missing the weightier matters of the law, justice, grace, and mercy.
Yeah, jeez. Greg, in your church time, were you a pastor, or were you a deacon, or where did you fit in the hierarchy?
I was a deacon at Glenridge, and then we left Glenridge and moved to Bolito, and then I ended up reluctantly getting pulled into a church. I didn't want to think, and I got pulled into eldership, and then I started preaching in a church in Salt Rock. But can I tell you where my preaching ended up going to, if I'm honest with you, Karl? So for me, Sunday mornings, I would start at like 4 o'clock in the morning. I would go and stand on the 16th green at some BT golf course.
Oh, yeah.
And I would stand there quiet and just try and feel what the spirit in me was doing and saying, because, and before I preached, I would often have two preachers prepared, based on what I felt that God was doing in me and what God wanted to do with the people in our church.
Okay.
And then in the morning, just before preaching, based on what would happen in the praise and worship, I would feel where the Spirit of God was highlighting on something, and that would give me a cue to go, the focus of God is here, not there. So I kept it open, because what I realized is I think too many preachers and pastors in church services have tried to fit God into what they're doing instead of giving God space to do what God wants to do. So you sing 3 songs and then someone stands up and goes, ND 5479, you've left your lights on. And if the children could go out to children's ministry. I mean, at that point, the Holy Spirit's hard-on has just stopped. Excuse the graphic pun. But can you see what's happened here? God's doing something in the singing, and there's this moment, and some human being decides that they need to bring some sort of structure into things. And let me tell you, you look at the created order, the Torah will tell you, it's the first Bible, trees are not planted in straight lines. You cannot contain God. God is free. And that's what he said to Nicodemus. He said, the Spirit's like the wind. You don't know where it's coming from and you don't know where it's going. What was he telling Nicodemus? You've come to me thinking you know what's going on. Nicodemus, you don't know what's happening. And until I reconnect you to your origin in God, you're actually full of crap.
Yeah.
I'm paraphrasing what Jesus did to Nicodemus in John 3. So as I started to understand that God wanted more latitude in church services, I started preaching and behaving differently, to the point when I was preaching, I stopped preaching with notes and I started sitting down on a chair instead of standing with my eyes closed. And instead of speaking off notes and what I'd prepared, I started speaking out the things that I was seeing with the eyes of my heart and what I felt God was doing and saying. And there was just mayhem in the church services. You would just hear people falling on the ground, people shrieking, and a lot of radical things taking place. And at that point, as I started moving in the supernatural, I heard God say to me, Greg, you are inaccessible. And I was deeply offended because I was putting so much energy and effort into trying to be a conduit for what God was doing.
Okay.
And I said, God, what are you saying? And I felt like God was saying to me, there's so much more I have to do to you, but you know too much. And that's when I stepped away from the pulpit, and that's when I stepped out of church.
Okay.
It wasn't a rebellion. It wasn't to smoke weed. It wasn't to party. It was because there was something more that God was doing with me, and there was more that I had to learn. But the structures, I had too much Bible in me. I don't know if that's making any sense. Someone listening to this, I think any Christian person listening to this is going to go, I'm a lunatic, but it's my story. It's just the truth.
No, absolutely. Hey, one quick question. What do you make of the Apostle Paul?
Hey, listen, a human like all of us. I think Paul had a wonderful saying. I think you never hear it quoted in the church. He spoke about the prophetic. He said, we know in part and we prophesy in part. I think for all Paul being employed by God to destabilize or to rescue Christianity from Judaism, there's a lot about Paul that doesn't go down today because of its, call it, context at the time. But one cannot doubt, I think the pivotal experience in Paul was his saying when he encounters the living Christ in Acts 10, where he goes, who are you? And I think I don't think that ever left Paul. For all his discourses, Paul ran out of adjectives. And I think one only has to look at chapter 1 in Colossians. The first chapter of Colossians, Ephesians, and Galatians are just stunning in that you've got this man that's running out of words to describe how wonderful everything actually really is. And my favorite verse of his is, I think it's in Ephesians 2, where he goes, from now on, there's no longer slave nor free, which deals with the class system, male nor female, which deals with the gender system, Jew nor Gentile, which deals with the religious systems. But he goes, Christ is all, in all, and through all. Just take the word all and ponder that forever. If all you did was sit on that verse for the rest of your life, you'd probably be a happy person. And, yeah.
Beautiful topic, eh?
Yeah.
Beautiful topic. Greg, one last question I got for you. And we're gonna have to do a part 2 of this at some other stage. Not even a question in my mind.
Let's do part 3 and 4, please.
Oh, man, of course. You know, I said to Paul van der Waal when I interviewed him, I was like, hey, we spoke for like an hour and a half, and it was...
what a good man.
Oh,
what a good man.
Top class. In fact, everybody that I've interviewed, man, I tell you what, it's been to... It's like you get to know them better, and you know what? At the end of every single one, especially the South Africans, the greats. I'm talking like the South African surfing legends, like Chris Knudsen or Nato.
Sure.
You come away from an interview like that, I think to myself, geez, like I've known Oak my whole life. Meantime, I've only met...
You haven't known.
No, yeah, it's been wonderful. Yeah, Greg, I just wanted to quickly go back to surfing and thank you for speaking speaking about Christianity and your testimony. Or I suppose there's many other angles rabbit holes we could have gone down. But thank you for having the courage to speak about that, because that's not common. That's not commonplace, especially in an interview like this. That's got to do with surfing. So move on, and in closing, Greg, whose boards are you riding now? And at the height of your career, who in your eyes was the shaper, the boy, the man? Who was the shaper? And we'll close up with that.
I would like to answer that I'd like to answer your question but not answering it, because essentially your question is asking for the one. And for me, I think it's the many. And I think each of them played their role in their time frames and in my evolution as a surfer. Spider Murphy in the early days, undoubtedly. I pivoted into Peter Daniels, riding reverse V bottoms.
Okay.
And Peter Daniels became that person. Currently, I'm riding Firewire boards, and it's crazy. I was saying to somebody, I did a stint riding Channel Islands boards, having had the Channel Islands agency. And I was saying to someone just the other day that I think like most people in their 50s, you have a battle with your weight. Yeah. So I move anywhere between 78 and 72 kilos. And when I'm 72 or 74 kilos, I'm just like a machine.
Okay.
And when I'm 78 kilos, you know, every now and again you can maybe fumble a takeoff here and there and you're a little bit out of whack. Okay? You know what I'm talking about.
Yes.
But I find the boards that I've been riding a Firewire Hydro Short. I've been riding a Revo 5'8" out of Firewire, and what it is that the technology in these boards, not so much in their construction, but in their shape and in fins and in everything, I have found myself doing tighter lines and surfing more radically than I was when I was in my prime.
Really?
How do you explain that? Yeah.
Hey, I'm scratching my head just looking at you, man. Jeez, like.
Yeah, that's the truth. And that's not, and listen, I'm not being falsely humble here. That's not because of sort of some like inherent lingering talent or anything. It would be the equivalent of like spending your life riding a city Golf and all of a sudden somebody pulls you into an X5 BM. You're going to have a different experience on the road. And that's what's happened with boards, and that's what's happened with me. Okay. And I found it when I was in Fiji as well. Like when I was in my prime riding big waves, all my boards were over 7 feet. When I was in Fiji during lockdown, there was me and my 2 sons and 3 or 4 other people riding 8 to 10 foot cloud break.
No ways.
I was riding that on a 6'6". You know what I mean? I mean, the smallest board I took to Hawaii in '92 was a 6'10". So you just look. You look how equipment has evolved, and it's actually about the equipment.
Wow. Yes, you know what? We're gonna have to do a part 2 here, bro, because you need to talk to me about cloud break some more, eh? Jeez.
Cloud break is the Reef Breaker Express. I surfed pipeline. I was more scared of cloud break for sure. Pipeline's the scariest 7 seconds you'll have in your life. Cloud break goes on and on and on. It gets shallower and bigger and faster, and you can't jump off. It's like getting on a tube train, and when you push the button for your station, the doors open, but the train doesn't stop. That's the only way you're getting off. But we'll save that for another time.
Yes, like it, bro. Listen, Greg, it's been absolutely nothing short of flipping amazing spending a little bit of time with you today. Just shooting the breeze, I think is what we can call it.
Yeah.
And
cool, man.
Greg, you've mentioned quite a few names that I've taken a mental note. In fact, after the call, I think I might just have to get some phone numbers from you, because there's some folk that you mentioned that need. Hey, look, this. Maybe they say, "Hey, Karl, listen, I'm not interested," and you know what? Some people have said that, but and I'm okay with that to a certain degree. But I'm also saddened by it, because it's like, hey, bro, you know what I mean? Anyway,
no. You know what, Karl? I've just had a thought while we're talking, brother. Why don't we do this? I think there would be value in possibly doing a trio time with you where, given my knowledge of the time frame and given where you're at and what you're doing, we could possibly get somebody on the show and make the show about them, and between you and I, we can craft a really good set of questions and excavate their story out of them. Maybe that sort of tripartite conversational thing could be something to think about. Yeah. I think there's place for that. So I would gladly facilitate putting you in touch with. I do think you've got to speak to Michael Burness. I do think you've got to speak to Tommy Lawson. There's people you've got to speak to, and obviously people from the Cape. There's a guy that I work with on a daily basis, Mark Fine. Not too many people know about him. He's been in the surf industry forever.
Hey, name rings a
bell, all the phases. Been through all the phases. He's a very, very bright academic, intellectual, and he's seen all these different things. And he will be able to talk about the evolution of the surf industry, brands, all sorts of things. So there's just a wealth. There's just a wealth of great surf persona in this country and across the world.
Absolutely. No, one time. Greg, we'll catch up soon. Shot, my bro. Stick online. I want to chat to you afterwards. Sweet.
Thanks, my brother. Cheers, man.
Laka. Ciao.